So we've got some of what we need for this class. Let's jump back over, and we are going to populate these variables that we created. So we'll drag a reference to the button component, the name label. Wait a minute, what? Name text. That is a text. Why didn't it want to drag? What? Oh, there's something strange. Okay, fine. So we're going to drag references to all of these game objects that we created, to the text components and the image components, and then apply changes to the prefab to save those changes in our prefabs folder. And now we can begin to write our code to populate our list of buttons. So we are going to create a new class attached to a new mono behavior attached to our content game object. So I'm going to select the content object, the content game object, and I'm going to type ShopScrollList, which doesn't yet exist. So we're going to create that and add it. And while we're at it, I'm going to create my simple object pooling script as well. Now, this script is, I'm not actually going to go line by line and teach it. I'm just going to paste it in because it is a script that is designed to make sure that this setup is performant once you start using many objects, but it's not exactly what this class is about. We do have another live training about creating an object pool. For those who don't know, what the basic concept of object pooling is that instead of instantiating and destroying objects, you set them to inactive and basically put them in a pile on the side. And then when you normally would instantiate a new object, you grab one of the inactive ones, reactivate it, and bring it back into use. So this is a very simple little script to do that. So I'm just going to create an empty game object. This is going to be called button object pool. And so we're going to add a component called simple object pool, create an add, and I am just going to paste this in from my notepad. I will talk really briefly about it when we actually call the functions from it, but it's got comments in it, and it's not super complicated. So I'm going to leave it to you guys to figure out on your own. So we're just going to paste that in, save it, and this will be on the Unity website with the archive when the archive goes up, so don't worry. Okay, so we've got our simple object pool, and I'm actually just going to set its prefab field here. It's going to be spawning our sample button prefabs, and we'll talk about exactly how it's working as we go. I just want to get that out of the way as we move on to our scripting phase. So let's select our content object and double click our ShopScrollList script so that we can begin scripting. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is to add some namespace declarations. So we're going to add, again, using UnityEngine.ui. We're going to add using system.collections.generic. And so we need UnityEngine.ui so we can make use of the types in the UI namespace. We're using system.collections.generic because we're going to be using generic lists. We're going to have a list of items which we're going to use to populate our buttons. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to write a little pure data class called item. So we're going to declare a public class called item, and this is just going to hold information about items. And this class, we're going to add the system.serializable attribute. And what this is going to allow us to do is to set the values of this class in the inspector in Unity, which is how we're going to set up all our items. So in this class, it's going to be tiny. We're going to have a public string called item name, which is going to be the name of the item, a public sprite for the icon, and a public float for the price, and we'll initialize that to 1. And that's it. So we're going to, in our shop scroll list, we are now going to declare a public list of items, right, of this item class that we just created called item list. And this is what's going to be doing a lot of the work for us. We're also going to have a public transform variable called content panel. Now, actually, you could get away without this if you wanted to. I just left this in there in case you wanted to organize your stuff differently. You can set what panel this is going to be attached to using that variable. We are going to have a public shop scroll list, so another instance of this class called other shop. And this is how the two shop panels are going to talk to each other. We're going to set a public reference to each of the other panels, and then they're going to be able to call each other's functions as they need to. We will add a public text variable called myGoldDisplay, and this is going to hold a reference to the header text, which shows how much gold we have. And then we're going to have a public simple object pool called button object pool. So this is what we're going to use to hold a reference to our object pool. So when we need to grab or remove more buttons, we're going to do it there. Now, the last variable is going to be a public float called gold, which is going to be the amount of gold that this panel has, and we'll set that to 20. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're just going to look at how our script is going to spawn our list of buttons without any interactivity to start, and then we'll set up the interactivity. So the first thing that we're going to do is we don't need to update, we can delete that. We're going to add a private function that returns void called add buttons. And what this is going to do is go through our list, figure out how many items we have in our item list, add buttons as needed for each of those items, and then call that setup function in sample button that I sort of created a placeholder, that empty function. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a for loop and loop through all the buttons in our list. So we are going to loop for as long as I is less than itemList.count. And we are going to first declare a new item called item, and that's going to be equal to the item at the current index in item list. Then we're going to declare a new game object variable called new button, which is going to be equal to button object pool dot get object. And so I'm going to give you a super quick look at the simple object pool to see how this works. But first, let's check on the chat and see how everybody's doing.